I'm here with Naveen Federico on August 14th, and we're talking about his experience. So, Naveen, first of all, you're an athlete scholar. Talk a little bit about your intense passion for your sport.
My sport is it's skiing. I don't rate it. Normally when people think of skiing, they think about ski racing, which is running gates or turning around those poles as fast as you can. But my discipline of skiing is more unique. It's called big mountain or sometimes free ride, which has a higher emphasis on nature's obstacles. And if I'm being completely honest, the judging, which is based on technique, is a lot more subjective, but
Okay.
it's so much fun and it's built me a great community and it's taught me a lot of things in life and it's always been a way for me to escape.
You were very young when you started doing it.
I guess my dad probably put me on skis when I was 2, 3 years old. And then I started on a ski team in Crested Butte, Colorado at age 7. And then I started competing when I was 10.
A long time ago. And you're just about to matriculate to college, to
Yeah,
university. So it's been quite a while. You said it's taught you a lot of things. Talk every time.
there's a lot of basic things that are very valuable. The value of hard work. Obviously, I wouldn't be where I am without lots of hours of practice. And then there's the idea of a team dynamic. I've never been one for team sports. And skiing is not your typical team sport, but you could definitely say it is a team sport when you're on a team. Obviously, you're skiing for yourself, but you're skiing for yourself with the support of the members of your team, and it builds an uplifting sense of community that kind of drives you to push yourself more than you ever thought you could. And then there's also the whole idea I've derived that kind of the mountains are bigger than you. And when you're just out there on a summit and you just look out to the horizon and you just see it's a humbling world. The sheer size of mountains when you're out there, it brings up about the idea of scale and relativism. And the way I see it is that in this huge planet, galaxy, universe, whatever you want to say, it's the everyday activities of our lives can be seen as insignificant. And I feel like that just brings ideas to be grateful for what we can get and to not be selfish.
You're a very well traveled person and you're a very well traveled family. And you've done a lot of work to benefit other people within this country and around the world. I'm specifically thinking of some work that you did in Africa, I guess about 2 years ago, right now. And then we can talk a little bit about how that maybe showed up in that beautiful essay that you crafted.
Yeah, so my family and we went to Kenya last summer for a couple of weeks, and my parents did ER rotations at this underserved hospital. And my sister and I went to this nearby village in a town called Longisa in Kenya, obviously. And this we went to this rural village and it was definitely the highlight of my experience. A man there had recently lost his home just due to erosion and degradation over time. And because of that, his wife left him to go find more sustainable living. And we went to that village and helped the villagers build him a new house. And it was
Yeah.
just an uplifting experience. We walked in the village and everyone there just wanted to give us hugs, it was out of the blue. All cultures are different, but they'd also never seen, a lot of the kids had never seen people who weren't black. And I'm by no means white, but they thought I was. So they're just calling my sister and I the white kids. And I don't know, it was cute and it was cool to see a different culture. And as far as the hut building went, they had the foundation set up when we were there. So they had a wooden kind of crossed up. They had wood poles set up in like grid shapes to make walls, and it was on the floor in probably a 100 square foot hut. And we went to a pond nearby, got water, we wet the ground, and then we stomped the ground until it loosened up into mud. And then us and all the villagers, we just started stacking the mud onto the foundation of the house. And then we did 3 layers of it, waited for it to dry. Afterwards, we sat down, had chai with them. They were so grateful for us. They thanked us with some food and kind of a farewell, not party, but it was more ceremonial. There was more of a ceremony.
It sounds like it was a very special time for you.
Yeah, it was unique. It was special. It was fascinating because those if any average American citizen walked into that village, all they'd see is poverty. It's what people call poverty porn. When documentaries and textbooks, when you see poverty, that's all they see. They just see the surface level of it, but really, those people are some of the happiest people I've ever seen because they have such a sense of community, and that surmounts the idea of money.
It's a beautiful expression of this. And you've done similar work around the world, right? You've traveled, you and your family have traveled to a great many places around the world. Can
Yeah.
you mentioned you're by no means white. Can you mention what your heritage is for the benefit of this interview?
Oh, yes. My grandparents are from India, and my mom was born in America, but she stays true to her Indian culture, and I try to too in many regards.
And about your father's side?
He, I know he's Italian. He's something else. I don't know what, but that his side of the family is
So what would you describe him as? What color? Is he?
racially white. Yeah, he's white.
So you're mixed. When it was interesting that when you talked about walking into the village, that they'd never seen black people before, or they'd never seen people who weren't black before, and you described yourself as by no means black. But it's interesting, and talk about identifying, because we've spoken about this before. Well, it's a question of identification. We talked about this when you applied to different schools, how you identify culturally and how you identify. There's so many different ways about it when it comes to identification. You talk about the ways in which you identify when it comes to maybe your Indian heritage or different kinds of identification.
I definitely take more pride in my Indian side, probably because it's more unique and I'm fond of it. Down the surface level stuff, food, the actual place itself is fantastic, but also the underlying values of community and family are also important to me. But if someone asks me how I identify, I always say I'm Indian. I never, unless prompted, I usually don't mention the fact that I'm mixed. I guess it's just the idea of, take my dad, for example. If he walks into a Japanese restaurant and he's that guy who has to ask for a fork instead of chopsticks. Like, I don't want to say embarrassing, but it's a little bit. And I feel like it just links to the stereotype of ignorance in just American cultural ignorance in America. And I don't always want to align myself with that.
That's an interesting thing, because knowing your dad the way that I do, I think of him as anything but ignorant. And I don't think that you're suggesting that, but I can understand what you're talking about. Can you lean into that sort of cultural ignorance of Americans? Because I want to start going in a direction about your travels and what you're thinking about studying and languages. Can you talk a little bit about that cultural ignorance? Because it's come up a number of times in our conversations.
It's just, I think America has a white saviorism complex, and in school you'll learn that America's this like great melting pot of all this diversity and all these. In the end, it's really just, in the end, the country is driven by rich white men, and I think that propagates from the top, from a hierarchical standpoint. It propagates from the top all the way down, and minorities are still discriminated against, and people don't take the time to care about the intricacies and unique values of all the different cultures in America.
And you're one of the things that makes you so unique, one of the things that we've had so much fun talking about, I think, over time. You may tell me later on. Nope, Dan, we have not had any fun talking about that. Is your cultural experiences. And one of the things that's been so interesting to me as a guy who's lived and worked in a lot of places, you're many years younger Yeah, but you're very well traveled. What are some of the places, just some of the places that you and your family have traveled to?
Let's India, Japan, China. We've been to Chile, Kenya, Iceland, and I don't know, probably one or two others. They're not coming to my mind at the moment. Yeah.
Talk about your trip to Iceland. This was a tell us why you went to Iceland, what the purpose was, and what the it was a gift of sorts. And talk about your experience there. Back us up and tell us.
Iceland, it was my parents' gift to me as a senior, a sort of senior in high school celebration trip. I had to choose wherever I wanted, where I had to choose one country that I wanted to go to, and I decided on Iceland because I've been fascinated with Iceland since I was a kid. I've always been fascinated in geology. Nowadays it's become a hobby, but I used to always be fascinated with Iceland's volcanoes and its geological placement over the tectonic plate fissure and just its remote nature, its kind of separation from the European mainland. And it's just been when the reason I wanted to go was really just because of the volcanoes, the glaciers. I just heard it's a beautiful place. And it's not a place that everyone goes. And I wanted to, I don't know, I thought it would be a unique experience. When people go to Europe, you usually go onto Instagram and you see the Italy trips, you see the France trips, you see the people in Rome, people in the Louvre, in Paris, in Spain. And I wanted to go to Europe and break away from that stereotypical tourism, consumerism thing.
And
Culture.
that you did. What was it
Yes.
like? Did you get, was it everything you wanted and more, or was it different? How did it show up for you when you went? Because you went on a lot of side trips with your dad and with your family, and like what were some of
Um,
the highlights from a scientific point
well,
of view and from a personal perspective?
so first thing was it was it was as beautiful as I had expected it to be. Lots of mountains, huge fjords, lots of glaciers. The thing that I didn't actually expect was the presence of culture there because I knew Iceland has history with Viking culture and kind of it's separate from the European mainland. It's safe to say that a lot of the EU, the main EU, has been westernized, but Iceland definitely has not. They still speak Icelandic there. They have a lot of Viking cultural heritage sites. As developed as the country is, you can drive 100 miles and see nothing but these small rural villages. And there's still a lot of culture in Iceland. And our trip it was a lot of sightseeing. We never actually went for any of the deeper cultural experiences, but just eating the food, talking to the people there, you definitely got a taste of it. And as for my favorite part of the trip, I mean, we went hiking on a glacier. We drove through the fjords. Those were two stunning pieces of the island. And if I definitely would, we went in the winter, so it was cold. And I would definitely go again one day when everything's green. Maybe explore more of the north and west side of the island since this trip we went south and east. Yeah, it's a really cool place. Highly
It sounds like a cool place. It's definitely on my bucket list. And how's your Icelandic?
recommend.
You've talked about wanting to learn a new language, and you've talked about a very specific language. Can you talk about what that language is and what your imperative
I've
value
always
would be?
wanted to learn Korean. Yeah, I was very sad to learn that my college does not offer Korean classes, but I've always been into Korean culture. I like the food. I have a couple of Korean friends. I've always wanted to go. I love K-pop,
Do you sing and dance K-pop?
not sing because I don't know the lyrics.
But you can
If prompted, I could dance.
that maybe that's something that we'll work on in the course of our work together. But just because they don't offer it at the school, and we'll get into the school that you're going to, doesn't mean you can't learn it. There are going to be Korean students there. There are a lot of applications and things like that. And
Yeah.
maybe that's where you end up doing your junior year abroad. Let's talk a little bit about, you're interested in so many things. First of all, the instrument. You're a musician as well. Talk about your musical
Mhm.
background.
I've never been like music. It is a passion, but it's not like my like skiing level passion. It's more of a casual passion. It's like in between hobby and passion
Got it.
because I never imagined myself being like professional or like playing in gigs or anything, but just like I play the French horn. I've played for 9 years and I love playing, in the school band. I like going to the concerts. It's fun. It's fun. I never go above and beyond. I never did it extracurricularly. I never practice at home. I just went to school and did it, and it was fun. But I really
Sure.
do like it, and I think I want to continue to pursue it in college.
Sure. But not a lot of French horn gigs. Not a lot of, if there are gigs that show up in Davis, French horn gig versus going skiing, I think you're probably going to lean towards the skiing, right?
Yeah, if someone ever offered me to do like a one-time thing in like a brass quartet, I probably wouldn't do it because I know I can't put in the time.
Let's talk about your other passions. What are you super passionate about when it comes to academic leanings? And then we'll start leaning in, talking about, assuming you want to talk about it, how that showed up in how you ended up selecting schools and going about applying. What have you been passionate about since you've been a kid in terms of academic studies?
Academically, I've always been passionate about sciences, and probably by late elementary to middle school, I had a more focused interest on biology and disease biology. So I had a lot of interest in pathology and epidemiology and infectious disease, which my aunt studied. And I used to, even at even when I was like 9, 10, 11 years old, I used to read books about world epidemics or like rare diseases. My fifth grade teacher used to let us make Google slideshows on whatever we wanted. If we had free time to research, she used to let us make these Google slideshows, and I made a lot of them. And when we were done, we would present them in front of the class. At the end of the day, it was like me and probably two other kids who actually did them frequently. I did one on robots. I did one on GMOs. I did one on axolotls. I think that my favorite one that I did was probably the one I did on Ebola.
And this is
And
when you're in fifth grade, just to
yeah,
iterate
this
what
was
time.
fifth grade.
So quite a while ago, 7 years ago. I remember when we were working on your applications, you talked about reading this book and imagining and correct me if I'm wrong, imagining that you would be coming up for cures for these diseases in your college or young adult years. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I definitely started, I started expressing an interest definitely in elementary school, probably like in fifth grade probably. But then by sixth, seventh grade, I definitely started reading into it more. And I read those books imagining that I could one day be the person who makes the cure for these diseases. And just I guess it was the aspect of discovering the unknown. I would read about how scientists had worked on a vaccine for Ebola upwards of 30, 40 years. Now just probably last year is they had a viable vaccine, and the virus emerged around 1980s. That's over 40 years of research. And I could totally imagine myself putting in 50 years of like tedious work studying just focused research on one thing. And I guess I could go my whole life and never get an answer, but I feel like the thought of getting that answer one day is super cool to me.
And that's really interesting that you talk about that. So what I'm hearing you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's the journey and the process is as fascinating to you as getting to the answer. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah,
You are at the core of things, a scientist. Yes, you're really a Renaissance man because you're an athlete, scholar, you're a musician, you are a writer. I know that we've been working a lot on that too, and
Oh,
you've composed some beautiful essays, and we've been working on some improv exercises and some other things too. But at the core of things, you live and breathe science. Yes. But I'm also
yes.
hearing about that the process is fascinating for you. Unpack that a little bit more about, you talked about you could be going for 40 years and still not have the answer, but getting close would be fascinating to you. Talk a little bit more about that.
I'm recently, just in the past couple years, when I don't want to say forced, it just happened, but my interest definitely honed in on that infectious disease aspect. And I taking chemistry in high school. I really liked chemistry. So it's why I majored in bio. So when I went and toured the UC Berkeley campus, we visited my mom's friend who has a PhD in organic chemistry, and he has a startup lab with a couple of his colleagues. It's super small, and they're working on research on a drug to cure a rare type of lung cancer, I believe. And I toured his lab, and it was a fascinating place to me. I could totally see myself in the lab, and he explained the career to me. He said that the average biochemist, in terms of a career in drug development, the average biochemist often will go their whole life working on a drug and never have it work. And even if you do have it work, it's often a 20 to 50-year process legally to get that drug on the market. That part of the process, not so interesting, but just the he explained the tediousness of his job, but I could totally imagine doing it. He said sometime I was going through that lab and he was explaining to me how sometimes you make a sample and you run tests on it, and sometimes you have to change something by a single molecule. So you have to sit back down for days, work out new reactions, get the final product that you want. And often with this isn't just your like vinegar in a volcano instant reaction. It's a chemical reaction that takes days and a lot of hours in the lab, but I could totally see myself standing there and doing that because I don't know, the process is a valuable thing to me.
You ended up, what school are you going to end up attending? You're starting school at,
UC Davis.
and I know you're very excited about attending Davis. What were a couple of the factors that helped you select Davis, and talk about the things that excite you most about going to Davis and what your plans are there, such as you know them.
Big factors. It's close to skiing. I got my major there, and it's unlike many biochemistry majors where you have to put in a lot of extra work and stress and anxiety to stay in the major. I have my major there secured for 4 years in that program. And also, on top of that, it's also an incredible STEM department and a huge research institution. Lots of money, lots of research opportunities. I'll be near San Francisco and Berkeley, so summer opportunities as well for research. Going to the campus, it just had a super chill, laid back vibe. I know it's considered a public IV, it's considered a very prestigious institution, but when you're there, it does not feel like that at all. It doesn't feel like a competitive environment at all. It just feels like everyone's living their life, just laid back. The town of Davis is definitely my kind of place. It's not a big city. It just has that quintessential college town vibe. Just a lot of It's small, has a lot of small businesses, a lot of recreational areas, has a farmer's market every weekend. Just all those little things, they're coming together. It makes a cute town. And I can definitely spend a lot of time there. What else? Those are the big things that drove the decision.
Yeah, and just for the sake of, this is an incredible interview. You're going to be helping so many people, Naveen. What you mentioned that you got your major. What is your major? What is the major that you're going to pursue at Davis?
biochemistry and molecular biology, so the other cool thing about it is I get this impression, and I've heard from a lot of people, that Davis allows you to not just study that field. They make a lot of room to study arts, social sciences. You don't have to stay confined to STEM. I did my class registration a couple weeks ago, and for this opening trimester specifically, I actually am keeping the scope basically primarily to STEM. But probably by the end of this year, I should be able to clean out my gen ed credits. And then in the next 3 years, I'll have tons of spots for fun electives. They have winemaking, they have beer making, they have a coffee class, they have a wild mushrooms class, they have a tractor driving class. They offer gross anatomy. Just, yeah, so I'll be able to. I've heard a lot of my friends who have these preset curriculums, and one of my friends was saying they'll have these preset schedules with 2 spots for electives in like their whole 4 years, which I'm glad I'm going to have a lot more than that to explore new horizons. Maybe I can't take Korean, maybe try a different language, or maybe make it to the community college to take Korean. I'll have time for skiing, clubs, extracurriculars. Seems like there's a lot of groups there, enclaves, if you will, lots of different communities. I know I'm going to find my people there for sure.
I think you articulated it beautifully. And I'm curious to know about, you talked about the vibe and the vibe being chill. And you visited, how many campuses did you visit over the course of your college search process?
I applied to 16 schools. I probably visited 7 or 8 of them.
Okay. And you were offered a number of scholarships. I don't know that you have an exact number, but you were offered quite a number of merit-based scholarships.
My parents' alma mater, Siena College, small liberal arts college near Albany, New York. They offered me base over $200,000, or right about there. It was almost a full ride. The University of Portland offered me $108,000 over 4 years. University of Vermont offered me about 70,000 over 4 years. And then there are a lot of University of Montana, University of New Mexico, both offered me about 15 a year. And then there were some smaller offers. CU Boulder was about 4,000 a year. University of Washington was about 3,000 a year. But yeah, I'd say over half of the schools I applied to offered me some money.
And this was, to what do you attribute this? This was predicated on your academic achievement, yes?
Yeah, they're all merit based.
I'm not stroking your ego when I say that this is a testament to how hard you worked in not just the grades you achieved, but the focus that you put into it. Can you
Yeah,
reflect a little bit on that and talk a little bit about the fact that it was also in an IB program? Because not everybody knows what an IB program is. Maybe you can speak a little bit about that.
yeah. So everyone knows what AP classes are. Every school offers them. I do have to say, my first 2 years of high school were very easy for me because it was just honors classes, and probably it was like one AP class I think it was one AP class freshman year, and then 2 or 3 sophomore year, which was very manageable. But in junior year, I started the IB program. It's similar to AP in the sense that it's a rigorous curriculum, and at the end of the day, you take a test. And depending on what you get on that test, you may be eligible for some college credit. But the program is a lot different in the sense that it takes a more global perspective on things. AP, they take the surface level stuff. They say, here's the formula, here's how you do this type of problem, and they teach you how to do it. And so long as you know everything that you're supposed to know, you'll probably pass the test. But in IB, they definitely they make you read into it a little more. It's not just the surface level stuff. Like I found that the teachers, they often taught you what you needed to know, but when it came to tests and practice problems, I found myself having to dig in further. Like it's almost like what the teacher taught, it wasn't quite enough. But then again, they couldn't really teach you how to do that problem. You had to use your own intuition to figure it out, almost in like a puzzle. That's how it worked in science and math classes. And especially in the science classes, there was also a more global aspect to it. For example, our physics class, we had an entire unit on the physics behind renewable energy because that's part of the IB curriculum. And the test, it wasn't always just science. Obviously, it was a science class, but even on the IB tests, they would have parts 1A through C, D, E, F. But more often than not, you'd have a question about renewable energy. You'd do the math, you'd go through the formula, solve some problems. But then the last problem would be, okay, so now explain one way that this renewable energy is applicable to like global societies or something. It's different in that sense because in my experience, an AP class would never ask a question like that. And the other thing about IB classes is that they're 2 years. A
Right.
lot of them, you take 2 years of class before taking the test. So it spreads it out and gives you a lot more time to dig in deeper to the concepts instead of just learning them on a surface level. And really, it feels like when I was taking AP classes, it really just feels like I was taking the class to pass a test. But in IB, it feels like I was taking the class to actually learn something. And then the program has other aspects, like it has a community service requirement to graduate with the diploma. Oh, and I guess I should mention, if you complete the program successfully, you do get a special IB diploma. This is passing all of your classes, passing all of your IB tests. There's a community service requirement. And there's also this thing called the extended essay, which is a 4,000 word research paper on whatever you want it to be.
And what was first of all, can you say what IB stands for?
Oh, it stands for International Baccalaureate.
And can you talk about what your 4,000 word essay was about?
It was a chemistry essay. It's really, they call it an extended essay. It's really just a big lab report. I did a research project on the back titration of antacids to determine the efficacy of certain antacids in the stomach. So I did a back titration of what is it? Tums, Rolaids, milk of magnesia, and then I did straight baking soda. And I found that ultimately Tums was the best antacid. And then I wrote a lab report on it. But IB also, I found before IB, lab reports were just about the science. But in IB, I definitely found they put a high emphasis on the reflective aspects of a lab report. If you didn't reflect on your interpretation of the process and how you think you could have done better and how you thought you could improve and how you thought you could, or how you developed the experiment yourself, you were not going to get a good grade if you didn't include those aspects. And if you just listed the procedure, the methodology, the data, and what it meant, and that's not enough.
Which leads to another really important subject here, which is your writing. And when we began working together 14 months ago, 15 months ago, it's quite a while at this point. And I feel very blessed that we've got many years left to go on this. We talked about writing, and I said, if you have one big fear, what is it? You said writing. It's not that you felt that you were a bad writer, but can you talk a little bit about when we began, what your feelings about writing and your strengths or weaknesses, or how you felt about writing in general when we first began?
Let's see. I always have been confident in my scientific and nonfiction writing. That's never been a problem for me. The big thing was even when my English teacher asks you to write an essay on what Hamlet's soliloquy says about society, That's never been my strong suit because I have a lot of thoughts and I've always had a lot of trouble organizing them. And then that my writing was always a little verbose because I always felt the need to explain everything. And you could say I always wrote assuming the person reading it was an idiot because I never knew where the person grading it would draw the lines and where I could cut out words and thoughts that could be unspoken. And then it really going into like creative writing and around if I were to compose my own story or just write something improvisationally, like that's always been hard for me because again, it's the same thing. I have trouble organizing my thoughts, but now I have to do it quickly and without any guidance. At least if I have a prompt, there's some form of guidance. I can write a thesis and stick to that thesis. But if you just told me to write a creative story about anything, that's for me.
Got it. And we went through quite a journey together when it came to your college essays. Can you talk about what that journey was like for you?
Yeah, there are a lot of essays. There are a lot about my interests, a lot about community. The U Chicago essay, I had to write a story about a Martian. And I always, in terms of the process, I really just sat down and wrote. The prompts for college essays are very vague. I think they do try their hardest to leave the floor to you. But for me, I just sat down and I just wrote whatever came to my mind. And often those rough drafts were upwards of 1,000 words over word count. So then I just had to evaluate what I liked, evaluate what I didn't like. There were a lot of ideas in those essays. I had to keep it down to one or two big ideas. So I usually just started editing and it just came down to one thing that I felt I could focus on. And then I honed in on that idea and wrote an essay until I thought it was ready for your revision.
And what was the back and forth process like for you? How did you feel that you improved as a writer, or improved, if not as a writer, how did you feel that you were able to abbreviate and get used to the process and improve the process, get it all done in time? Because there were a lot of essays and we were on a pretty short timeline.
Definitely by the end, I was able to churn out those essays in 1 or 2 days. At first, it was just like it was a write, you edit, I revise, you edit, I revise until we thought it was perfect. But a lot of similar ideas came up, and each prompt has its own nuances. So I definitely tried to play to those nuances, which I thought was very important. So it was never a copy and paste situation. I definitely think I learned to write very well about those ideas that kept recurring in a lot of prompts. Because I just say 9 times out of 10, you go to a college's portal and they have 5 options for a prompt. One of those prompts is going to be about your identity. And as I kept writing those essays, I had a lot of those ideas lined up. And it was fun to explore that. I think it allowed me to explore those ideas deeper, find a different little nuance for each prompt and talk about something a little different each time. But the writing process became a lot more concise, and I do think doing all of that writing also helped me become a better writer in from a creative perspective.
And and I think it definitely did. I know it did. Did it feel, talk about how it did it feel, you talked about you used to write as though assuming that the person who was reading it was an idiot, but I think a lot of that had to do with the way that you were very comfortable with your scientific side. Yes, writing to a structure and writing to a style that
Yeah.
you're used to. Talk a little bit about, if you would, Naveen, how it maybe loosened you up or gave you a different way to approach writing. Can you speak a little bit about that? And because we've been doing a lot of work over the course of the summer
Yeah.
in terms of prepping you for that. And you seem to derive a lot of joy from it. Or if not, you're pretending and pretending very well.
I guess I should say that I get a lot of that. A lot of my writing style is derived from my interest in scientific writing, and I am very good at scientific writing. In school, I've never had to rewrite or redo a lab report. Or if we read a true story in English, I always get an A. But in English class, Hamlet and No Country for Old Men and How Long Till Black Future Month, it doesn't come as easy to me. I've had to do a lot of revision. But I think that's why in science you have to explain every single thing. You can't leave anything out. If you leave it out, you're going under the assumption that the reader won't assume that it's there. That definitely does carry over to my writing in English. And I actually think one of the biggest things about the college essays was the word counts, because it forced me to determine what was essential. And I had to start to learn, okay, here's what's not necessary. Here's where the admissions officer will probably be able to draw a line and see what's behind the lines, read in between the lines and see what's there. And I think that's what helped me the most, actually, was the word counts. And first time it was really hard, but as I kept doing it, definitely, I started writing first drafts that were closer and closer to the word counts. And it definitely loosened me up a little, because I think I started to be able to learn what was essential. And I think
Yeah.
that also did, college writing aside, I think that also helped me in my school writing also.
So let's speak about that a little bit, because you were doing your college applications in November, late October, November, early December. So can you reflect on how that was helping you in your school writing? Because this was coming right around the time you were doing your 4,000 word paper, as well as finals for many of your classes. There was a lot going on during that time. So
Yeah. So
that comment you made about how it helped you with your school writing as well is fascinating. Can you unpack that a little bit?
yeah, so the 4,000 word paper was basically complete at that time, but there's these things in IB called IAs, internal assessments, which contribute to your overall exam score. In English and Spanish, they're orals. In sciences, they're lab reports. In math, I had to write a 20-page essay about math. Yeah, in chemistry, I did an experiment where I made my own biofuels and burned them. But these IAs weren't until second semester of senior year. And I was writing all these college essays first semester. By the time I finished those college essays and second semester came along, I had all these big writing assignments on top of the IAs. We were starting to learn how to write paper twos in English, which is part of the IB exam. The paper two is a comparative literary analysis, where you have to compare the author's craft in two different literary works. And then we were also doing a lot of practice with the paper one, which is looking at rhetorical devices and author's purpose in non-literary texts. Come second semester, a lot of scientific writing, a lot of English writing, and I think the college essays helped me a lot to learn how to build my ideas and make a point quickly and kind of round it all off with a good conclusion. And also I feel like in my college essays, there's a lot of a story loop. When you open, with your childhood at the end, you connect back to that same story about your childhood. I think that directly paralleled to my ability to better link back to a thesis at the end of an essay and keep a focus on a thesis throughout an essay, which is very important in English class.
Yeah, beautifully stated. And we talked about that in your story loop. And I'm thinking specifically about that beautiful story about walking through the fields with your father and harvesting the, I keep thinking of the hot dog flour, but I can't remember what it was. What was it? And then you came home and made the pancakes. Can you talk a little bit about that? I don't know whether it'll go into this interview or not, but it was just such a beautiful essay.
It was just my dad and one of my first scientific interests was botany. I used to have a lot of plant books, and there's a marsh plant called a cattail. It looks like a hot dog on a stick, but in like early summer, the stick part gathers a lot of pollen on it, like a lot of pollen, and it's probably 4 or 5 sticks of the pollen probably amount to maybe 3/4 of a cup. But anyways, it's the pollen's actually a flour substitute. And so I'd always wanted to, they say you can make pancakes with them. And I'd always wanted to try. So one day my dad and I went out to a cattail field near our house, gathered up a bunch of pollen and made pancakes.
It's a cool story, and it went into one of your essays, and I think it's one of your earlier essays. And I think it was just such an emotionally resonant piece. And you and I are going to continue our journey. Lucky me. And I think it's something that, I hope it's going to benefit you going forward as well. We've been doing, is it okay if I keep you just a couple of more minutes? I know
Yeah.
where there are. Cool. We've been doing some very non-traditional writing exercises over the course of the last few weeks. And I've taken you outside your comfort zone. I guess we've had you write a poem, and can you talk a little bit about those and how those have maybe stretched your boundaries and taken those outside your comfort zone, and how those might or might not benefit you as you go into college? Because college writing, tell me about your perception. There's no us, me and the dragon that lives in my head, about what your perception is of college writing and how these exercises have been stretched you in terms of your writing.
So yeah, given, I'd say average, probably 25, 30 minutes, I've written a poem about water and a story about rabbits and pharaohs. What else? Those are the two that come straight to my mind.
The poem about water, I believe that I assigned you, it was a free range assignment, because we're working over the summer to just keep the water flowing through the pipes as you get ready to go to Davis, right? And what was the assignment?
The assignment was just write about water. So
no rules at all, just write about water. And so where did you take it?
So my initial thought was go science. And then I thought about, I wouldn't say I have a knack. I have a little interest in philosophy. And I feel like water is such a huge thing in philosophy because it can exist in any form. It can flow through anything. It's the source of all life. So I decided to write a poem about water and kind of link it to, I started scientifically, but then I decided to come full circle and link it to life and human nature. And I was only given half an hour to do it. So it really just, it forced me, this assignment and all the others, it forced me to, when put in an abstract context, just go for it and not think so much.
So to be clear, my directive to you was, don't think about it. You only have 30 minutes. You can't fail. Go. And it was such a beautiful, cool, interesting poem. I want to come back to your interest in philosophy, because it's something it's a thread that's run through many of our sessions. Do you have the poem about water handy that you can read?
Pull it up real quick.
Can you pull it up? It's such a stunning poem. I wonder if you could read it.
Okay, here it is. So I called the poem Water's Melody. Here goes. In the morning light a river flows, a gentle stream where life bestows its precious gift of purest grace, water's embrace in every place. From mountains high to oceans wide, in every form it does reside, a force of nature so divine, in every drop a tale to find. O water, your life's melody, a symphony of eternity. You quench our thirst, you heal our soul, in your embrace we become whole. From gentle ponds to raging seas, a universe within your ease. You cleanse our wounds, you wash away the stains of time, a brand new day. So let us cherish every drop, for life on earth you'll never stop. In harmony we'll ebb and flow, united with you our love will grow.
This is a beautiful poem. And was this your first crack at writing a poem? Had you ever written one before?
Oh no, I've been in many poetry units in English.
That's what I figured. But this was your first one where somebody had said, you got 30 minutes, go, right? And water is something that's near and dear to you. What was the one about pharaohs and rabbits? I think the prompt was pick any animal. What was it?
No, it was rabbits. You said write something about rabbits and mummies.
Oh, because mummies was one of the electives that you've been looking at. right?
Yes.
It's one of the really cool electives that came up at Davis. And how did rabbits come up?
I
Did I
have
say
no idea.
give me any letter of the alphabet and then add one?
No, rabbits were part of like our conversation that day.
Oh, that's right. Rabbits came up in the conversation. So I think the directive was give me something, just write any piece connecting
You just said right about rabbits and pharaohs, or
rabbits and mummies. And again, what was that? It was like that right for 20 minutes or right for half hour. That was it. Do you have that piece?
yes.
All right, let's pull that one up. That was a beauty. That was another beauty. And more
Yeah.
importantly, before we start, did you have fun with it?
Yeah, that one I did have a lot of fun with.
Let's hear it.
Okay, I decided to go for a story on this one. This is the story of the rabbit that became a god. In Egypt, the land of the pharaohs, some of the most revered creatures are cats, baboons, falcons, cobras, jackals, and vultures. These all have two things in common. Firstly, they are seen in some form within an Egyptian god, and second, they are all predators of rabbits. In the beginning of Egypt, rabbits were neglected and cast aside because of their, quote, godlike properties. However, one summer day, an old desert hare named Wennet was crossing the vast Sahara Desert. This particular species of rabbit has adapted to the relentless climate of the Sahara. However, Wennet, in his old age, was becoming less and less resilient. He was in good health, but as he looked above into the blistering sunlight, he saw the distant silhouettes of vultures circling the sky, reminding him that death was likely near. His premature thoughts of death demonstrated his readiness to enter its unknown void, something that went against the shy and timid nature of the desert hare. This caught the attention of the gods above, particularly Anubis, the god of death. It was rare for him to see someone or something that felt ready to die, so he spoke to Wennet, his voice manifesting in Wennet's head with a ghost-like quality. Wennet was taken aback as Anubis spoke, but soon settled into the supernatural presence. Anubis spoke with a soft intensity. Wennet, although you are a mere rabbit, you have caught my attention with your thoughts of death. Anubis proceeded to explain the concept of the afterlife and the fact that those who are worthy are reborn and that the best of the best ascend to the status of a god. Anubis offered to guide Wennet through the afterlife, but in order to reach that point, Wennet would have to be mummified to allow his spirit to ascend. Wennet was hundreds of miles from the nearest civilization, so Anubis lent him the strength to make it to the great city of Cairo, where he reached the foot of the king's throne and collapsed as the last of Anubis's energy and his own life energy left him. Like any other rabbit, the king left the rabbit's corpse to be eaten by its scavengers. However, days passed and the rabbit's corpse was left untouched. Cats and the other normal scavengers were avoiding the corpse, which the king saw as a sign of respect from the gods. So the king gave Wennet the honor of mummification and allowed him to ascend hand in hand with Anubis. The end.
It's such a beautiful story. And the way that you were just able to collapse all those things together. And what was how long did it take you to write it? I say just
Half an
write with a
hour?
bandit. Half, and you're not taking mummies. You're not taking the mummies elective this time, but you've left
No.
it open to take that. We did have a lot of fun going through the electives. What else was on there? Mummies. There was a zombies.
Yeah.
There was a scientific approach to both of those. It's awesome. I've been fortunate enough to mentor you along the way here. And one of the things that we've talked about as you go to Davis is I want you to focus on your studies the first year is are working together and you're mentoring other people, right? Beginning maybe next summer, mentoring
Yeah.
other people coming in. How does that idea resonate with you? Is that something that you're excited?
I'm big on, I do like teaching. I have experience with it and I don't know, I like the idea of giving other students what my teachers and mentors were able to give me and
Talk a
more.
little bit more about that and how maybe whether it's our work together or the teaching experience that you have would inform your work with young people, maybe eighth graders, ninth graders coming into a program like this or going through what is probably a very stress producing process. What would be
I mean,
your approach?
not only have my teachers, I've had a lot of great teachers they teach me what they're supposed to teach me, but they've also been influential figures in my life. They've shaped the way I think about the world and they've helped me grow as a person. I don't know, to be that to play that integral role in a student's life, I think would be really cool for me. And also to teach someone something that they're passionate about I'm passionate about chemistry, and to see other people passionate about it is cool to me also.
Yeah, you absolutely are. And what about helping people, as you've done on your own, and I think as we've done together, and I've just been the catalyst in this process, find the best in themselves and help maybe not only work on things that they already are good at, but maybe things that they don't have as much confidence in. Say the writing for you, where you already were strong on the scientific writing, but things like the rabbit and the pharaoh or water, or taking them outside their comfort zones. How do you feel you're better equipped to do that now, based on kind of the limited stuff that we've done together and also the work that you did during the application process?
Definitely, I'd say when I am taken out of my comfort zone, I'm not a huge fan of it. At the end of the day, I'm grateful that I had the experience because it definitely helps open me up. And I think that's definitely something that I would love to give to other kids, no matter how much they may resent me for it. Hopefully they don't. Hopefully they wouldn't. It's like when your mom says, "Everything I do is because I love you." It's like it may not seem like the best thing in the world at the time, but I'd hope exercise in a teaching setting, exercises that I may devise or tasks that I have for a student, they always will contribute towards a greater goal in the end.
Beautifully, beautifully put. Wow. You're such an amazing guy in every way. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but you're also an incredible interviewee. This is our first interview together. I wonder what your thoughts are on being interviewed as an interviewee and interviewing other people. How would you say you are at interviewing other people? Have you ever interviewed anybody else?
I have a long time ago in sixth grade, we had
Okay.
to do a project. We had to do this project on beetle kill. It was a research project, and the teachers required part of our research process to be an interview. So we were in sixth grade. We had to set everything up and do the interview. We had to record it, and we had to integrate some of it into our final product, which was a mini documentary, if I recall correctly.
A mini documentary as a sixth grader. That was a while ago, and I'm sure you knocked it out of the park. I wonder what your thoughts are on at being interviewing other people, and that insofar as that makes you a better interviewee. Because one of the things we're going to be doing, and I think your mom talked about this already, I extended our work together so that have the privilege of working with you all the way through your senior year, because you're going to be safe to say you're going to be going to grad school. I think that's
Yeah,
pretty safe, and you'll be doing a lot of applications for that, but you'll also be doing a lot of interviews, not only for grad school, but for the shadowing opportunities and the things along the way. And that'll be a lot of fun. But do you think that interviewing other people makes you potentially a better interviewee?
oh, absolutely, because especially in my case, having never really been in a formal interview, if I was the interviewer, I would definitely listen to my interviewee's answers. And if one day I was the interviewee, I would probably use certain aspects of how that person answered their questions to answer my questions. I don't, did
So
that
it
make
sounds
sense?
no,
Did that make
it made perfect sense. It made perfect Naveen sense, and it made perfect sense. And it sounds like, you know what it sounds like, Naveen? It sounds like, and we haven't really talked about the technique, so to speak, of air quotes around that, of like your interpretation of active listening, which I know what active listening is. Yes, it is. And so here's my micro assignment for you this week. And we'll get into another time your fascination with philosophy. It's going to be pretty tough for you to go back in time. Name three philosophers. Name three of your favorite philosophers. Any three.
I do. I love Aristotle.
Okay, that's one.
I'm spacing. I can't believe I'm spacing on this guy's name. I do have a favorite philosopher, and I'm totally spacing on his name
Okay,
right now.
Google famous philosophers and see if it comes.
That's who it is.
Oh,
I like the work of Jean-Paul Sartre.
Sartre. Okay, great. Great. And have you read any of his stuff? Have you read any of his philosophical works or his plays or No
Not
Exit or
really,
anything like that? You have.
briefly,
Okay.
but never in depth.
Briefly. Okay. Unless I'm mistaken, he's passed. I could be mistaken, but
He's past.
I
He's
don't think
very
I don't
past.
think I don't think I don't think I'm mistaken. Great. Here's your micro assignment this week. You're going to interview him in a mock interview, and no more than 30 minutes. The interview can be talk show format, it can be Zoom, it can be anything. Here's the only rule: don't edit yourself, and have a lot of fun.
Okay.
And it'll be, would you like to do it in French or English?
English.
Okay, I'll do it in English, or you could do it in Korean as well. Okay, awesome. What's the assignment?
Interview with Jean-Paul Sartre.
Okay, no more than 30 minutes, and it can be any format at all that you want. Okay, so awesome. It would have been cruel for me to have you do it in French, but in a year's time, the assignment will be to do it in Korean. Any final comments, observations on how this interview was? Because at some point, maybe I'll have you interview me, other people. And here's the reason why. I think interviewing other people, you're going to have a lot of interviews along the way. And some of it I'll media coach you on too. I think you're going to make a killer interviewee, but there's going to be all kinds of interviews. You can have interviews by Zoom, in person,
Yeah.
like pop interviews. Hey, there's an interview in an hour. Just get ready. Fair to say that's something that you'll want to
Yeah.
work on. How was today? How was today for you?
Good.
It was a lot of fun. All right, awesome. Great to see you. And I cannot wait to see this interview. Hear this interview.
Okay.
Okay. Great to see you, Naveen. I'll see you next week.
Okay. Bye.